Welcome, Call family. This is Tracy Allen, editor-in-chief of the Kansas City Call newspaper. I want to welcome you to this week's show of the Wake Up Call. Thank you guys for being faithful supporters of this 106-year-old publication. You guys do not know how much it means for us each week for you to either read us or watch us or just, check out some of our content that's on our website. So we want to thank you guys so much for that. Today, we got a special guest here on the Wake Up Call. Many of you have seen her in the community. Many of you have known her for decades as a young girl growing up in Kansas City. We have none other than the Jackson County, Missouri prosecutor, Melesa Johnson. Melesa, thank you for joining us today here on the Wake Up Call.
Thank you so
How's it,
much for having me.
how's it going as far as from the standpoint of, how would I say, the last 11 months been for you as you've taken this position?
Well, again, I have to reiterate that it is certainly a pleasure and honestly an honor to be on with you. I think I might have told you this in the past, but my grandmother faithfully picked up her call paper every single week. And I just have so many memories as a child growing up on the East Side, seeing that paper on her kitchen table. So thank you again for having me. These past 11 months have been the most rewarding, invigorating, trying, informative 11 months of my life. This is a difficult job. Running an office of 176 people with some pretty robust responsibilities certainly is not a walk in the park, but I feel so supported and frankly so capable thanks to the community, thanks to law enforcement, thanks to everybody internally in my office. And so we have a lot of work to do, a lot more work to do, but I'm very proud of the ground we have covered in this first year on the job.
You said being the first year of the job, and you talked about a ground covered. A lot of people, when they walk in a position as important as you have, because you're the major law enforcement here in this county. How overwhelming was that, and how were you able to get yourself in a place where you calm down and realize, hey, now it's time for me just to get to work?
I don't even think overwhelming is the word. It was downright terrifying, if I'm being honest.
Oh,
It was downright terrifying. I mean, I work with the best people in this office, but you have to understand that you inherit this staff. You do not get to, start from a clean slate and hire, 76 attorneys, investigators, legal assistants. You inherit what is already here. And so, of course, I was a little worried. Some of these people trained me when I was a little baby prosecutor coming right out of law school. Um, and just the insecurity naturally that can come along with that. But when you do the work and you work hard and you are supported, which is why I wanted to make mention of that, you can really accomplish anything. And that is just the mantra and the motto that I kept convincing myself of. And I did it to the point where I started believing it. And no matter if I was overwhelmed or insecure or terrified, I showed up every single day and I'm still showing up. And naturally, slowly but surely, some of those feelings have subsided. They'll never fully subside. Anybody that tells you that they're in a position like this and they have no cares, no worries, no insecurities, no imposter syndrome, I don't want to call them a liar, but I will be telling you that they are less than honest, because it's just so big. There's so much weight. Literally, people's lives are in your hands on a daily basis. But it is a privilege, one that I welcome with open arms, even in those terrifying moments.
what did Jean teach you specifically during her time? Obviously, she's a long time prosecutor. You were under her. What were some of the things that you learned from her and so forth?
The main thing that I learned from Jean Peters Baker is it is okay to redefine traditional definitions of justice. You know, Jean will be and has always been very honest and open about her transformation, being a prosecutor for as long as she was. Starting off, maybe doing things the old school way, very traditional, very okay, was a law violated? Let me see how much time I can get. Let me try to get to the max. But over time, Jean has been so candid about looking at justice and defining justice in a way that looks at the broader community impact. Okay, I could go for the max on this particular individual, but I have to balance that with understanding that I'm taking a father away from his children for a nonviolent crime. I am potentially taking the breadwinner out of a home for a nonviolent crime. What does marrying all of these factors, the law, the criminal history, but the community, how does that all play a role in defining what justice is? And frankly, Jean was well before her time. You know, we didn't really start leaning in diligently into criminal justice reform until Mike Brown in the years thereafter. Jean has been in this game for a very, very long time and a trailblazer. And so I have learned a lot from Jean as it pertains to what is justice, the basic definition of justice for this office. It may not be for the entire criminal justice system. It may not be the same definition for the Trump administration, but for this office, justice absolutely means incorporating how community will be impacted. She's also taught me a lot about resolve and staying the course and keeping your head down and standing 10 toes on the decisions that you make. This job comes with a lot of criticism, a lot of thoughts, a lot of people telling you what you should or should not be doing, but the power of making a decision, leaning into it, but also being smart enough and wise enough to know when you need to change course. Those are some of the foundational things that I have gained from Jean, and I am honestly forever grateful.
Right. And you mentioned about that being an office of criticism. I obviously know, being an editor of an
Yeah.
historically black newspaper, that yeah, it comes with criticism, but at the same time it comes with criticism, it also comes with conviction of what you believe is the course of action that needs to be taken and so forth. One of the things that we talked about, and you and I talked about this a little bit, as far as even before, during your campaign, even before you were elected, about the concerns, obviously, within the community, and as specifically as it relates to, how can I say, personal crime, domestic violence.
Hmm.
Off of a month that, I don't call it celebrating, but an awareness month that's every year, dealing with the domestic violence, and as far as whether it's partner, uh, child, whatever, as far as family, somebody that you know. We are in a climate now. When I say a climate, a country where, I don't want to say it's anything goes, but I would probably say a climate that can hinge on someone making a decision that brings consequences.
Hmm.
And I know this is a very dear subject area to you as well, as far as domestic violence. What are some things that you are doing within the office of prosecutor to be able to start addressing, even in our own communities, and particularly in community of color, like Black
Yes.
community and the Latino community, especially, um, when it comes to this issue of domestic violence?
Well, thank you so much for that question because you are absolutely correct. Domestic violence has been an extreme focus of my administration. And that is because well before I even decided to run for prosecutor, I was Mayor Quinn Lucas's director of public safety. And through that work, building coalitions, working closely with the municipal court, I realized that about 90% of all domestic violence cases were being handled at the municipal level. Now, you have heard as many stories as anybody else, Miss Tracy. You know that some of the domestic violence, actually, a lot of the domestic violence incidents that happen in our community are not municipal offenses, they are felonies. So, the second week I was on the job, way early in January, I sent a letter to all of our policing agencies in Jackson County, as well as all of our municipal prosecutors' offices in Jackson County, with a very detailed list of factors that, if are present, warrants submission of that case referral to the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office for state level charging consideration, as opposed to the municipal prosecutors' offices all over Jackson County. And that is no disrespect to the municipal prosecutors, the municipal judges. They are talented, well versed attorneys. However, they only have so many resources and available consequences at their disposal. I have a lot more just off of the sheer nature of being the state level prosecuting office. So I am proud to proclaim that we're seeing early signs of success. Last month, we launched a public facing domestic violence dashboard
Correct.
that
I remember.
indicates a couple of things, and it can be found on our website. Just Google Jackson County Prosecutor and it'll take you right there. But we have seen over a 10% increase of referrals from law enforcement to my office on domestic assault cases. That means that our officers are actually submitting and investigating and solving more cases for prosecution. We are also charging more of those cases. Last year, our charging rate was about 54% for domestic assault cases. This year, that is up to 70%. And the reason why that is so important is because the more that we can hold individuals accountable before the loss of life occurs, the more that we can prevent domestic violence oriented homicides from occurring. And that is what the data is starting to show. We also have amazing victim advocates that hold all of our survivors' hands through every step of the criminal justice system. We even have two office dogs, two emotional support dogs, Jackson Ralph, to help
Did you
people.
have Jackson and Ralph before that? I mean, did they also have?
Yes, yes. Jackson and Ralph predate me. They definitely predate me, but they are some of our most valued team members because they really help people bring their walls down and be vulnerable and start what is a very difficult process, because usually when you're talking about domestic violence, you have a lot of love for your accused, right? You have a relationship, you have children with this individual. And now you are potentially going down a journey that might land that individual in prison. But another thing that we are doing is understanding that prison is not always the answer, because the data shows, again, looking at that community impact, that the majority of people will reunify with their partner even after a domestic violence incident occurs. So at Jackson County, we actually have a domestic violence diversion program run by Judge Mary Weir. And we pour so many resources into our survivors, but we have to pour that same level of effort into our offenders. I'm sure a lot of people are ready to write them off. They don't deserve to be a part of our community. In some ways, I can understand that. But we also have to work under the guise of reality. And in doing that, we have to equip these individuals with the tools to have healthy relationships with their partners, with their children, with their mothers, with their friends, because a lot of them have grown up in ecosystems where everybody beat everybody. And that is just how love has been normalized. So we're doing a lot of work in the domestic violence realm, including building a focused deterrent strategy centered around domestic violence, like we've done with Save KC.
One of the things I appreciate, Melissa, you mentioning that, and I don't know our audience doesn't know this, but even though I'm editor in chief of the Kansas City Call newspaper, and Melissa knows this, and others in the community know this, I work inside the prisons from the
Mhm.
stand helping men and women. And actually, I teach an anger alternatives class at Lansing Correctional Facility in Lansing, Kansas. And one of the things that I remember, and guys constantly say this to me, well, if someone had had something for me on the outside, particularly the ones that have issues, are in prison because of domestic violence issues, then I would have been able to maybe think a different way with this. And so one of the things, excuse me for the car that's next to me and so forth, but anyway, I think that that was a concern that I've had as far as what are we providing in the communities for our offenders and so forth. And
That
you,
has to be part of the work.
yeah, you mentioned that because I thought that, it's important for us to support the individual that is the victim, no doubt about that, 100%. But I think as far as from a deterrent standpoint, what is our whatever we're doing in our prosecutor office and our law enforcement offices to be able to deter those individuals. And that's one thing that I can say for a fact. Gentlemen have told me time and time and again, if I had only known this, if this was only, you know, accessible for me before I got locked up, and before I came to prison, I maybe would have listened. So
Right.
I appreciate and am really glad that the prosecutor's office is working on that area. Now, obviously, you mentioned about a 54%, went from 54% level, basically, I guess, as far as cases up to 70%. And you mentioned a lot of that from the standpoint of data. Data seems to have, and I know it's a real big thing that you mentioned even in your campaign, but focusing on data, talk a little bit more about that and how that has helped you guys.
Well, if you don't frame your narrative, the community and people will try to frame it for you. And listen, I'm not naive. I know that a lot of people, especially people that live, on the east side of truth, believe Kansas City to be a dangerous and violent city. And in some ways, I have to agree, right? We're sitting at 125 homicides. One homicide is too many. 125 lives lost is certainly unacceptable. But I do think it is important for the community to know that homicides are actually down from last year. Our
Right.
community needs to understand when progress is being made. And make no mistake, these are not victory laps. These are not pat on our backs, because we know anybody that works in the criminal justice violence reduction realm knows that you can take 10 steps forward to take 6 steps back, but you continue to move forward. Data is a way that we can level set and indicate where progress is happening, but where we need to funnel additional resources. It's not enough just to do the work. You have to bring the community into the work and make sure that you are availing them yourself to their understanding. Not only do we have a public dashboard for all of our categories of crime, we also have a domestic violence specific one. I mentioned that. We even have an online search engine where you can type in your police report number and see where it is in the life cycle of a case. Because this system, the criminal justice system, is a system. And it is a very complicated and convoluted and confusing system sometimes. Most lay people think that if a crime occurs, they see it, they pick up the phone, call the police, make a report, and then boom, the person lands in jail. It doesn't quite happen that way in practice. And so this database enables individuals to see, has the case even been submitted to our office for charging? Is it
Did you
still under
guys,
review?
did you ever have that beforehand?
No, we did not. That
Mhm.
is new. That is new under our administration. Because
And
again,
how are people, and I didn't want to cut you off, but how are people handling that? And is it something that's become popular for you guys?
it has, education is powerful and it's empowering, right? I'm sure you've heard it, in your line of work. The prosecutor just won't file my case. The prosecutor isn't prosecuting. The prosecutor doesn't care about property crime. Well, the prosecutor can't prosecute what we've never received. And so this enables our community to actually see the trajectory of their case throughout the entire process. Transparency. We cannot ask for transparency from every other institution and think that the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office is immune. And so we are transparent as we can be, and we are committed to doing that moving forward, because the community needs to know that actually in all categories of crime, excuse me, most categories of crime, the numbers are trending in a positive direction: burglaries, stolen autos, theft. And again, not a victory lap, but we are hoping to end the year substantially down from where we were last year.
Now we're like at 100. I think you mentioned 122, and obviously this time last year, and as we head into these next 5 weeks, which are very critical because usually, and I think a lot of our audience knows when the holidays hit, um, due to things that may be unforeseen, job losses, lack of funding, whatever, interpersonal relationships. A lot of times, as you and I know, that number can tend to inch up.
Yes.
So, what would you tell, particularly our audience, particularly with this time of the year, but also with the climate that we're in due to the administration and the things that are going on as far as whether we talk about food stamps or healthcare or just life in general, things that are happening. What can you tell, particularly those call readers that are watching, how can they handle to be better advocates for those that may experience um, an unfortunate situation during this holiday season or they have? And what can they do about that?
So, as a proud product of a single mother, and now as an adult woman myself, I look back and I just sometimes wonder how my mom made Christmas and Thanksgiving happen, by herself for multiple children and the stress and pressure that comes along with that. And I feel like that stress and pressure is magnified tenfold right now, to your point, because of a lot of the things that are happening in our country. People are more vulnerable now than arguably in the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, And so when people's basic needs are not met, that makes them so much more likely and susceptible to either being victimized by crime or committing a crime. My biggest message to our community is trying to impart upon everyone that the holiday season is not worth your freedom, right? Like you have to have emotional intelligence in the moment to do a cost benefit analysis and realize, okay, is this one act that I am about to commit, worth all of the headaches, struggle, heartbreak, and strife that could likely follow? And to our earlier conversation, domestic violence also customarily skyrockets during the holiday season. The kids are out of school, everybody's at home on top of each other for extended periods of time. Nerves get high, right? We are charging a lot more domestic violence cases. So, do you want to go down that road and potentially meet one of my prosecutors in the courtroom? Or do you want to take a breath and a moment and look at the big picture? We cannot talk about crime and violence reduction, and I think you'll appreciate this more than most, without talking about emotional intelligence, mental health, processing emotions, gaining those tools on how to navigate high stress, high pressure situations. On the streets, it's customary pick up a gun. We'll just get into a fight. We'll get into a stabbing, right? But in real life, right? You have to learn how to navigate those. And I want to be sensitive to the fact that I had an amazing mother. She imparted those tools on me as a very young child. Not everybody has that luxury. But that's why people like you, Tracy, are so important. And there's so many other organizations and mentors and people out there that will pour into you if you just open yourself up. So this holiday season is not worth your freedom. Please, please, please make smart decisions because the prosecutor's office stands ready and waiting to hold you accountable.
Thank you, Melissa, for sharing that with our audience. And I want to encourage our audience to take it from a woman that is in and out of a prison and in prisons pretty regularly, monthly, talking to men and women who have been either aggressors or victims of domestic violence. This is not a time, particularly the holiday season and with the climate of our country, for you to lose your freedom. and to not only destroy your own family's well being for the time period, however long it is, but just for yourself. Melesa, she's wanting you all to see the importance of getting the help. And the
Yes.
prosecutor's office is a key place. It's just one start, but there's other places that you can get help if you know you're in a position where you know it can be life and death, not only for yourself, for your family members, but also your freedom. So take into consideration this holiday season, get the help you need, but not just the holiday season, guys. Like Melesa said, this is 12 months out of a year, 365 days, 24/7. This is critical because we want to see success. And I know that Melesa, when she was elected as prosecutor, all of us had the confidence in her to be able to help you guys have confidence in yourselves that you can do better and be better. And so that's something I really love about Melesa. And I know she cares and loves this community greatly. Take her up on her offer. Go to the prosecutor's office and ask, what are some programs that can help me
Mhm.
be able to stay out of a situation where it could cost me my freedom, possibly even cost someone their livelihood. Before we go, Melesa, is there anything else you would like to tell as far as, call readers and visitors and viewers, some things that, and want to encourage them to do?
That is a hard act to follow, Miss Tracy. That was so beautifully said. And thank you so much for making sure that your readers understand that there is help out there. On top of contacting the prosecutor's office, I also highly encourage you to contact Combat, our community backed anti crime tax program that works closely with a number of organizations in our community aimed at reducing violence. We are also seeing promising statistics in violent crime arenas through our Save KC Focused Deterrence program. Once again, giving people the help that they so desperately need. And through that work, we've seen a 40% reduction in homicides amongst Save KC participants, and even a 62% decrease amongst non fatal shootings for Save KC participants. And so, what I would like to leave your listeners with is that we are going to continue to lean in equally to accountability and restoration. You can't have one or the other, and you can't have one without the other if you truly want to deliver on the promise of public safety. We are expanding diversion programs. We are revamping New Start, our main diversion program for early low level nonviolent offenses. But we are also charging a lot more cases and holding a lot more people accountable. So the choice is yours. As I've said numerous times, please change your life, or this office will change it for you because the community is counting on us.
Okay. And I close with that and really thank you, Melesa, for saying that. Guys, it's time to change your life, or the prosecutor's office will change your life. And like I said, I serve in prisons here in Kansas and Missouri. And I would hate to see some of you up in here simply for not taking, what we've talked about to heart. So, Melesa, thank you for joining us. We look forward to having you back on the show and so forth. Continue to do what you do and what the people, you know, had confidence and have confidence that you're able to do. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank
Thank you.
all of our readers and our listeners from the Call newspaper for joining us here on the Wake Up Call. And we look forward to you on our next show. So talk to you guys later and peace.